Officer Travis Hensley thought he was dealing with just another nobody, until Judge Clarissa Monroe calmly showed him the badge that would turn his world upside down in front of an entire town. Clarissa Monroe never liked to be late. That morning, she'd slipped on a simple grey blazer over a navy blouse, tossed her robe into the back seat, and grabbed a quick coffee from a corner shop in Terrell, Texas. She liked blending in when she wasn't behind the bench. No flashy car, no driver, no security detail trailing her like some of the other justices insisted on. Just her and her weathered '09 Toyota Camry humming along the streets toward the courthouse. She was halfway down Greenway Street when she noticed the police cruiser lurking 2 cars behind her. She didn't think much of it. She signaled her turn carefully, checked her mirrors. Old habits, but the lights flashed anyway. Clarissa slowed, pulled over neatly by a gas station, and placed her hands firmly at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Through the mirror, she caught a glimpse of the officer. Young, white, thick-build, moving fast toward her car like he was already angry about something. She sighed quietly. The door slammed open before she could roll down the window. "You in a rush or something?" Officer Travis Hensley barked, already glaring. Clarissa kept her voice even. "Good morning, officer. May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" "License and registration," he snapped, ignoring her question. His hand hovered too close to his belt. Clarissa started reaching for her wallet slowly, narrating her every move. "I'm reaching into my purse, officer." But something about her calmness seemed to make him angrier. "Don't move so slow. You think you're funny?" he said, leaning in closer to her window. His breath smelled like stale coffee and impatience. Clarissa swallowed her irritation. "I'm cooperating, sir. Here's my—" Before she could finish, Hensley yanked the door open. Clarissa flinched instinctively, gripping the seat. "Get out of the car!" he barked. She didn't argue. She unbuckled, stepping out with slow, deliberate movements. The moment her feet touched the pavement, the slap came, a sharp, humiliating crack across her cheek that echoed louder than the traffic around them. Gasps erupted from the bystanders nearby, people filling up their tanks or grabbing breakfast from the gas station store. Clarissa's head whipped to the side, her blazer slipping off one shoulder. She tasted blood. For a second, the world froze. Hensley stood there, chest heaving, looking more satisfied than shocked at what he'd just done. Clarissa straightened herself, blinking the sting out of her eyes. She resisted the urge to touch her face. "You just assaulted a sitting judge," she said quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement, like telling someone the sun would rise tomorrow. Hensley scoffed, taking a step back. "Yeah, right." A woman nearby dropped her coffee. A man pumping gas muttered something under his breath. Phones were coming out, shaky fingers fumbling to hit record. Clarissa reached into the inner pocket of her blazer. Slowly, she pulled out a gold badge that glinted hard under the Texas sun, the seal of the state Supreme Court. The color drained from Hensley's face faster than a drain emptying. Clarissa didn't say a word. She didn't have to. All around, the energy shifted. Angry murmurs grew louder. One man was already calling 911, though they were less than 5 blocks from the courthouse and the main police precinct. "You messed up!" someone shouted from the crowd. But Clarissa kept her eyes locked on Hensley, steady and calm, even though her cheek throbbed and her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew better than to show weakness now. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was standing for every person who never had a badge to shield them. But the tension was only just beginning to rise, and the next few minutes would make the scene explode even bigger than anyone standing there could imagine. Officer Hensley's hand twitched near his holster. For one sickening second, Clarissa thought he might try to arrest her anyway, maybe even draw on her. But something about the way the crowd pressed closer, phones raised like shields, made him hesitate. "Put that away!" Hensley barked at a teenager filming from across the street. His voice cracked. The kid didn't budge. Neither did anyone else. Clarissa stood her ground. Her voice was low, but carried like thunder. "You assaulted me in front of witnesses. You're going to answer for that." Hensley's mouth opened, then closed. His chest heaved like he couldn't get enough air. He took a stumbling step backward. An older man in overalls, a mechanic, judging by the oil stains on his hands, called out, "You better call your boss, son. You done messed up real good." Clarissa watched Hensley's fingers tremble slightly. She almost pitied him. Almost. The officer fumbled for his radio. "Requesting immediate backup," he barked into the mic. "Possible disturbance at the Shell station, corner of Greenway and Cypress." He didn't mention that he was the cause of it. Clarissa crossed her arms loosely in front of her, badge still visible. Her cheek was throbbing harder now, a deep, hot ache spreading down her jaw, but she kept her voice even. "You know who I am," she said. "You know what comes next." Hensley shook his head slightly, as if trying to physically shake off reality. "Didn't know," he muttered. You don't look like a judge." The words hung in the air, heavy, ugly, and real. Clarissa didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The crowd around her heard it too, and their outrage started to simmer, boiling under the surface. A woman holding a toddler stepped closer. "What exactly is a judge supposed to look like, huh?" she called out sharply. Hensley ignored her, pacing in a tight circle, his face blotchy and red. He didn't apologize. He didn't offer help. He just looked trapped. The first patrol car screeched up seconds later. 2 officers hopped out, one Latino man, one white woman, hands hovering near their hips, eyes wide when they saw the scene. Clarissa spoke first. She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She spoke like a judge, clear, deliberate, and commanding. "Officer Travis Hensley assaulted me during a traffic stop. You are now witnesses to that fact. My name is Judge Clarissa Monroe, Supreme Court of Texas." The male officer blinked twice, processing the words. His partner stiffened visibly, glancing at Hensley like he was radioactive. "You serious?" she asked, eyes narrowing. Clarissa simply held up her badge higher, letting the sun catch it. Another car pulled up. Then another. Sirens in the distance, loud, urgent, not the kind meant for fender benders. The gas station manager came running out, yelling, "I got cameras! It's all on tape!" Hensley's shoulders slumped like the weight of the entire town just landed on them. Clarissa watched him, waiting. She wanted to see if he would own it, if he would say sorry, if he would try to right even a fraction of what he had broken. He didn't. Instead, he looked away like a child caught lying, mouthing silent curses to himself. The other officers moved in, separating him from Clarissa, corralling the crowd, trying to get a handle on a situation that was already far beyond their control. Someone from dispatch squawked over the radio. "Lieutenant Reeves is en route. ETA 3 minutes. Clarissa caught the sideways glances the responding officers were giving her, half sympathy, half fear. They knew this wasn't going to stay local, not with half the town holding phones, not with security footage from 3 different angles. The woman officer, her nameplate reading Sanders, approached cautiously. "Ma'am, are you injured?" she asked. Clarissa nodded once. "He struck me across the face." Officer Sanders looked like she wanted to melt into the asphalt. "EMS is already on the way," she said. We're gonna handle this." Clarissa held her gaze. "I'm staying until Lieutenant Reeves gets here." Her tone left no room for argument, and so they waited. But when Lieutenant Reeves arrived minutes later, the storm that hit Terrell, Texas, made everything that had already happened look small in comparison. A black SUV with government plates tore into the lot, scattering pigeons into the air. The doors swung open almost before the tires stopped rolling, and Lieutenant Vernon Reeves stepped out, his face set in stone. Reeves was a big man, but not sloppy. Square jaw, salt and pepper hair cut close to the scalp, dark sunglasses he yanked off the second he saw the scene before him. He spotted Clarissa first. His whole body stiffened. He pushed through the circle of officers like a man on a mission. "Judge Monroe," he said, voice low and clipped. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Clarissa didn't nod. She didn't smile. She simply turned her head slightly, letting him see the raw red handprint swelling on her cheek. The silence that followed was suffocating. Reeves's jaw twitched once. Then he turned to Travis Hensley, who was standing awkwardly by his cruiser, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. "What the hell happened here?" Reeves asked, voice controlled. dangerous. Hensley opened his mouth, but Clarissa beat him to it. This officer pulled me over without cause, demanded I exit my vehicle without explaining the reason for the stop, then struck me across the face, she said evenly. All before verifying my identity or credentials. Someone's phone beeped nearby. A text, probably, or a recording notification. The bystanders weren't moving. They weren't missing a second of this. Reeves turned fully to Hensley now. "You hit her?" he asked, voice low like a rumble before a storm. Hensley swallowed. I didn't know who she was. Reeves took one slow step closer. "You thought that would make it acceptable." Hensley opened his mouth again, floundering, but nothing coherent came out. Clarissa's voice cut clean through the air. "My identity doesn't excuse what you did. It just makes it impossible for you to pretend it didn't happen," the crowd murmured. Officer Sanders looked like she was ready to be sick. Reeves looked around, taking in the faces, the phones, the security cameras glinting from the gas station's awning. He closed the gap to Hensley in 2 long strides. "Hand over your weapon and badge, right now!" There it was, the first crack in Hensley's armor. He blinked, stunned. "Lieutenant, you can't be serious." Reeves didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You assaulted a Supreme Court judge, Travis. You're lucky this doesn't end in handcuffs on the spot." Reluctantly, Hensley unclipped his badge, then slowly handed over his sidearm. His hands were shaking. Clarissa stood still, watching him. Not with vengeance, not with glee, with disappointment. The kind that cuts deeper than anger ever could. Officer Sanders quietly stepped up and took Hensley by the arm, leading him toward a second cruiser with an open door. Hensley didn't fight. He didn't look back. As soon as he was out of earshot, Reeves turned to Clarissa again. "Ma'am, we have medical en route. I'm deeply sorry for what happened. It will be handled properly." Clarissa nodded once. "See that it is." Her voice cracked just a little on the last word, but she masked it quickly. The mechanic with the oil-stained hands walked over then, wiping his palms on his jeans. "Ma'am," he said gently. "I got it all on video, just so you know." Clarissa turned to him, really seeing him for the first time. He was probably mid-50s, sun-worn face, kind eyes. "Thank you," she said, meaning it. "People got to see it for themselves," he added quietly. "Ain't nobody gonna be able to spin this." Clarissa managed a small smile. "You're right." The empties rolled in moments later, cutting through the crowd. One of them, a young black woman with tight curls under her cap, took one look at Clarissa's face and shook her head slightly. Clarissa let her examine the swelling, not because she needed the treatment, but because she understood the importance of documenting everything. As the medics worked, a low buzz of conversation filled the air. More cameras arrived, local news vans, reporters scrambling, microphones jostling. Clarissa realized, with a strange numbness, that her face, bruised, strong, unbroken, was about to be everywhere, and the conversation about what had just happened wasn't going to be quiet. But the firestorm that was building would not just change Officer Hensley's life, it would pull Clarissa into a much bigger fight than she ever asked for. It didn't take long for the videos to spread. By the time Clarissa finished giving her official statement at the station, her phone was lighting up with missed calls and text messages from colleagues, journalists, and even old college friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Someone had leaked the footage to a local news outlet within the hour. From there, it caught fire. Clarissa sat stiffly in a windowless interview room at the Terrell Police Department, sipping stale water from a paper cup, while Lieutenant Reeves made endless calls just outside the door. Through the thin walls, she could hear the frenzy. Phones ringing non-stop, officers whispering, the occasional raised voice. Her cheek had darkened into an angry bruise. Every time she moved her jaw, a sharp pain flared. The door creaked open, and Reeves stepped inside, his face drawn tight. "They're calling it a gross miscarriage of justice," he said, almost apologetically. "State Attorney General wants a full investigation. FBI's been notified." Clarissa set down her cup carefully. "Good. It should be investigated." Reeves nodded grimly. "The mayor wants to meet you personally. So does the city council. She exhaled slowly. I'm not interested in shaking hands and smiling for cameras. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. They're scared, Mom. Terrified, really. This isn't going away. Clarissa knew that already. She could feel the weight of it, like a heavy coat she hadn't asked to wear. I'm not here to make them comfortable, she said quietly. Reeves didn't argue. Just then, a young officer knocked and poked his head in. Lieutenant, you need to see this. Reeves frowned and stepped outside. Clarissa followed him into the main hallway. Mounted TVs above the reception desk blared local news. There it was, her face, close up, the swelling plane under harsh lighting. Beneath it, a banner in screaming letters. Breaking! Supreme Court judge assaulted by Terrell police officer. The reporter's voice cut sharply through the static. Civil rights organizations are already calling for criminal charges against Officer Travis Hensley, who was suspended without pay earlier this afternoon. Clarissa caught a glimpse of Hensley being escorted out of the station in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, hunched in on himself, surrounded by a wall of silent, grim-faced deputies. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like anything. A woman from Internal Affairs, thin, sharp, with clipped blonde hair, introduced herself briskly to Clarissa and handed over a copy of her preliminary report. It read exactly how she expected. Use of excessive force, failure to verify identity, failure to follow proper procedure, violation of civil rights. This will move quickly, the woman said. Too much attention now. Clarissa didn't bother smiling. Attention fades, justice shouldn't. The woman gave her a rare, grim nod of agreement. As Clarissa made her way to the parking lot later that evening, escorted by 2 plainclothes officers, she paused on the steps. Across the street a crowd had gathered. Not protesters, not yet, but concerned citizens. Holding candles. Some holding handwritten signs, "We stand with Judge Monroe." A teenage girl broke from the group and ran across the street, stopping a few feet away. "I just wanted to say," the girl said, voice trembling. "You're really brave." Clarissa felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. She smiled gently. "Thank you. So are you." The girl's face lit up, and she darted back across the street, joining her friends. Clarissa stood there for a moment longer, letting the scene sink in. She hadn't asked for any of this. She hadn't sought fame or sympathy. She had just wanted to get to court on time and do her job. But sometimes life hands you a fight you never asked for, and you either step up or you let it pass you by. Clarissa Monroe had never been the type to stand quietly on the sidelines, but the pressure was about to mount even higher as Clarissa prepared to face a tidal wave of public reaction, support, criticism, and everything in between. By the next morning, Clarissa's name was everywhere. Cable news anchors debated the incident like it was a heavyweight match. Talk radio was flooded with callers. Some outraged, others disturbingly defensive of Officer Hensley's actions. Clarissa sat at her kitchen table in her modest brick home on the east side of Terrell, a mug of black coffee cooling beside her laptop. The footage had been replayed so many times she could practically hear the slap before it happened. Emails poured in by the hundreds. Law students, civil rights advocates, fellow judges, even a retired truck driver from Idaho who wrote simply, "You're stronger than I ever could have been. Keep standing." Clarissa closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every message. She hadn't set out to be a symbol, but now there was no escaping it. Her phone buzzed again. It was an old colleague from law school, Devin Brooks, now a professor at a mid-sized college in Kansas. His voice cracked with emotion as soon as she answered. "Clarissa, I saw the footage. I'm sick over it." She pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "I'm all right, Devin." "No, you're not," he said gently. "None of us are. This shouldn't have happened. Not to you. Not to anyone." Clarissa didn't argue. What could she say? That she'd somehow expected it? That being a black woman, even with robes and honors and years of service, never felt like enough protection outside those marble walls? Instead, she asked, "How are the students taking it?" Devin hesitated. "They're angry. They want to protest, organize rallies. Some are already writing letters to the state bar. Clarissa smiled faintly. It wasn't fear she felt. It was something sharper, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Tell them to stay peaceful, she said. Their voices will carry farther that way. After she hung up, Clarissa turned on the television again. Outside the courthouse, people were gathering. Homemade signs waved above the crowd. Some faces were tear-streaked, others full of quiet, righteous fury. An older black woman in a church hat spoke into a microphone, her voice shaking. "This is about dignity," she said. "About respect that shouldn't have to be earned with a title or a badge." Clarissa leaned back in her chair, absorbing every word. This wasn't just her story anymore. Across town there were rumors swirling that Hensley had retained a high-priced lawyer from Dallas. Some TV pundits were already speculating whether he'd claim he feared for his life. The same tired excuse Clarissa had seen trotted out in case after case that never got their proper justice. But there were too many witnesses this time. Too much undeniable evidence. And maybe, just maybe, the country was tired of excuses. Clarissa's mind drifted to the crowd gathering in the sticky Texas heat. She pictured young faces holding signs, old veterans leaning on canes, kids sitting on shoulders, chanting her name not because they knew her, but because they knew what she represented. Not a perfect system, not a fairy tale victory, just the stubborn insistence that dignity belonged to everyone. The doorbell rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. Two plainclothes detectives stood there, looking serious but respectful. One of them, a tall black man with a thick Memphis accent, introduced himself as Detective Lionel Griggs. "Ma'am," he said warmly, "we're assigned to assist with security, just for your safety. Things are heating up." Clarissa appreciated the honesty. She nodded. "Thank you, Detective." Griggs gave a small smile. "We got you, ma'am. No one's going to touch you again." For the first time in 2 days, Clarissa felt her chest loosen slightly. She wasn't alone in this, not by a long shot. But as the legal wheels began turning faster behind the scenes, Clarissa knew that true accountability wouldn't come easily, and it certainly wouldn't come quietly. The courtroom buzzed with a kind of energy Clarissa hadn't felt in years. Not excitement, not fear, something heavier, a demand for something most folks around Terrell weren't used to seeing. Real consequences. Clarissa sat quietly in the front row, flanked by 2 attorneys from the State Judicial Committee. She wasn't presiding today. She was a witness. At the defendant's table sat Travis Hensley, looking smaller than ever, in a wrinkled suit that hung off him like a costume. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman from Dallas named Marla Whitby, kept whispering frantically in his ear. The judge, a no-nonsense woman from a neighboring county named Ruth Dillard, called the session to order. Prosecutors laid out the facts plainly. There was no speculation needed. Video after video showed the same thing. Hensley pulling Clarissa from her car, slapping her across the face, refusing to verify her identity, escalating a simple stop into violence. Clarissa took the stand with steady steps. The courtroom held its breath as she placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. When the prosecutor asked her to describe what happened, she didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She told it plainly. "I was treated as less than human because of an assumption made the moment he saw me," she said, her voice never rising. "The badge in my jacket shouldn't be the reason anyone regrets mistreating me. My existence should have been enough." Somewhere in the back, someone wiped their eyes. Clarissa glanced at Hensley briefly during her testimony. He wouldn't meet her gaze. When it was time for the defense, Marla Whitby tried hard to shift the narrative. "Officer Hensley feared for his safety," she said. "He thought he was dealing with a potentially dangerous situation." Clarissa's attorney stood immediately. "Objection!" Judge Dillard's gavel came down sharply. "Sustained. Stick to facts, Ms. Whitby." The defense sputtered, but there wasn't much to salvage. Too many witnesses, too much video, too much truth. When closing arguments wrapped, the judge didn't waste time. She found Travis Hensley guilty of battery, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Sentencing would come later, But the verdict was clear. As Clarissa stepped outside into the thick afternoon heat, cameras flashed and microphones thrust toward her. For a moment, she thought about ducking into the waiting car, about letting someone else speak for her. But then she thought about the teenage girl with the candle, the mechanic with the oil-stained hands, the thousands of strangers who had written letters and posted signs. She stepped up to the bank of microphones. "My name is Judge Clarissa Monroe," she said clearly. "And what happened to me happens to too many people who don't have a title or a badge to protect them." The reporters leaned closer. "I am grateful for the outpouring of support," she continued. "But gratitude is not enough. Justice isn't a gift. It's not something you earn by being respectable or educated or famous. It's a right. And until that right is guaranteed for everyone, everywhere, none of us are truly safe." She let the words hang there, heavier than the sun beating down on the concrete. No slogans, no theatrics, just the truth, spoken plainly. Clarissa turned and walked away without taking questions. The cameras kept rolling, but she didn't look back. Later that night, at home, Clarissa sat on her porch, legs curled under her, watching the stars blink into existence. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from someone she didn't know. A young woman from Louisiana. It read, "Because of you, I'm applying to law school. Thank you for fighting even when you didn't have to." Clarissa smiled softly, setting the phone aside. She hadn't chosen this fight, but maybe it had chosen her for a reason. Maybe, in some small way, standing her ground had sparked something bigger than one trial, one town, one bad cop. Maybe it had reminded people that dignity didn't have to be demanded with shouting fists. Sometimes it could be claimed quietly, firmly, unshakably. But as Clarissa sat in the warm Texas night, she knew the real work, the hardest work, was only just beginning. Weeks later, Clarissa stood at the steps of the Texas Supreme Court building in Austin, her robe billowing gently around her ankles. She had agreed, reluctantly, to give a speech at a small ceremony, honoring public servants who had demonstrated exceptional courage under pressure. She didn't think she deserved to be celebrated. She had only done what any person with self-respect would have done. Still, as she looked out over the small crowd, students, community leaders, families with children perched on shoulders, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since that awful morning at the gas station. Hope. Clarissa adjusted the microphone and began. "I've been a judge for many years," she said, voice steady. "And one thing I know for certain is that justice doesn't live in marble buildings or flow automatically from gavels and robes." She paused, letting the silence settle around her. "Justice lives in the small choices we make every day. It lives in the moments when we choose dignity over pride, when we choose truth over comfort, when we choose to see each other fully, not as stereotypes, not as threats, but as human beings." A soft murmur of agreement drifted through the crowd. She smiled faintly, not the kind of smile meant for cameras, but something real, something earned. "I didn't survive that traffic stop because of my title," she said. "I survived because I refused to let someone else's ignorance define my worth." A young boy in the front row, maybe 10 years old, leaned forward, hanging on to every word. Clarissa's heart lifted slightly at the sight. "I won't pretend the world changed overnight because of what happened to me. It didn't. Real change moves slow. It stumbles. It gets pushed back. But it keeps moving forward, if we push with it." Clarissa caught the eye of an older woman standing off to the side, the same woman who had spoken at the courthouse rally weeks ago. She gave a small nod, the kind that carried generations of battles behind it. "I don't stand here today because I'm special," Clarissa said, voice firm. "I stand here because I had a chance to speak, and I chose to take it." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice without losing an ounce of strength. "And you," she said, scanning the crowd, "have that same choice. Every single day." The young boy beamed at her, his whole face lighting up. Clarissa finished simply. "Choose courage. Choose dignity. Choose to stand, even when it's easier to sit. Because when you do, you give permission for others to stand too." The applause was gentle at first, then swelled naturally, without prompting. Clarissa stepped back from the microphone and let the crowd have their moment. After the ceremony, people lined up to shake her hand. Some cried, some laughed. Some simply pressed their palms to their hearts in silent solidarity. Clarissa stayed until the very last one had gone. As the sun dipped low over the Texas hills, painting the sky in soft golds and reds, she gathered her things and walked slowly toward the parking lot. Her Camry waited for her, the same battered one. No security detail, no fanfare. Just her, a set of keys, and the road ahead. She slipped behind the wheel, took a long, steadying breath, and smiled to herself. Not because the fight was over, but because she knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. And this time, she wasn't driving alone. Not really. Across the state, across the country, people had heard her story, and maybe, just maybe, they would carry a little more awareness, a little more resolve into their own lives. Clarissa Monroe didn't need statues or headlines. She needed change. Real, stubborn, everyday change. And she was ready to keep fighting for it, however long it took. If you believe in standing for dignity, respect, and truth, even when it's hard, don't stay silent. Be someone's reason to hope. Subscribe and share this story. Let's keep moving forward together.